Hello, Internet. Gino, that Pinguino Grieco here again, and my voice is hurting right now. I'm not going to lie. I have had a long day of talking to a lot of people.
Do you want me to do the intro?
No, you can. I'm doing the intro. I'm joined.
All right, baby, let's do this.
I'm joined, as always, by Billy Fold Me Paper Rothert.
I am pretty delicate, and when it comes to the fine arts, I do prefer paper manipulation as my medium. You know, paper airplanes, spitballs. I really take those kind of things to an art form, and I think that's going to reflect in my interpretations of the game that we picked this week.
I'm a fan. See, this is why we bounce off each other, because I'm a fan of rock, and your choice of paper, I feel like we just can't coexist if you pick paper and I pick rock.
I mean, it's okay. It's just kind of a yin and yang type deal, and this game has a lot of those kind of cultural elements, so let's just work with it.
So the game we're going to be talking about today is Tengami. We also have an email to get to, but we're going to wait until next week when Pete is back with the show, or I guess next regular full podcast to get to that. But thank you to everyone who sent feedback. Go ahead at Deep Listens Pod on Twitter, deeplistens.libsyn.com. We have a bunch of comment sections, and then deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com, which is where we got our feedback from. So thank you once again. So Tengami, why don't you set us up? What is Tengami?
Okay, so when I saw this game, I really saw it in a Humble Bundle, and the bundle was called, like, I forget what the exact name of it was, but it was like games that just look pretty, games that you just want to look at. And so it had a couple of games in it, one of which was Tengami, made me interested in it, so I looked it up a little bit and saw it seemed to have a pretty cool sort of structural architecture. It's an indie game, which is always nice as well, but as far as stuff like story goes, there really isn't any backstory. You just open up the very first scene of the game, and you see a nameless character with really
open a book.
Right. You open an actual storybook, and it's designed to be a pop-up book. We're going to get to that in a little bit. But the first character you meet has no name, and you get a couple of lines of sort of poetic text about memories and dreams, and you see this very short sequence of a man sitting under a tree. Seasons pass in rapid succession in front of your eyes. The tree withers, and then the man sort of gets up and goes on a journey, which is, I guess, to revive the tree. That's all we really get. And there's not much to it. It's really just a visual art kind of game, and most of what we're going to be talking about tonight is how they execute what little story that they do have. Yeah,
and so I feel like there's not much to spoil with Tengami. Like, there's a few not haikus. I don't think they're actually haikus, if I counted the syllables right.
Maybe were they supposed to be haikus, like in their original translation?
Was this game made in Japan?
I actually don't know, but I could imagine if there was like a translation thing, maybe.
Yeah, if you could look that up, see if it was actually made in Japan. But when I counted the syllables on some of them, it was not 575. Although the formatting was
it looked
3
like
lines.
It should have been a haiku.
It was always 3 lines. But I'm not sure if they were each haikus. But even the haikus are pretty. If the short poems that punctuate basically the beginning of the game, and then the 3 puzzle solving sections when you finally kind of solve each section of the game, they're pretty vague. They evoke a general sense of melancholy and dreams and kind of this fantasy scape that you're inhabiting. And so it's just doesn't have a lot of resonance with me. I thought the game, by and large, the only thing I really want to talk about is the look, the sound, and the gameplay, because I thought that the story was so thin that it's almost impossible to discuss.
I would agree. I think that there really is no deep story here. We can, I guess, touch maybe just a few minutes on what there is, because it has like a minor theme going on, but I think it's really open-ended, open to interpretation. But let's talk some about the mechanics, right? So first and foremost, the thing that stands out the most to me about this game is that first, it is built and designed. The architecture of it is a pop-up book. And this game was designed such that if this game was ported to real life, this could be a real pop-up book. Everything that's actually foldable and interactable in this world could be made to be real. I saw like a developer's video where they said we actually like designed a lot of these levels on real paper. This could be a real pop-up book. Almost like I think every single part of this game can be a real pop-up book, which is very, very cool. I think that it doesn't necessarily lend that much to it being a good or bad game, but it's a really cool visual aesthetic.
Yeah, and I thought that the choice to make the game in that pop-up book style was one of its most interesting obviously, there's not, it's a very, very short game. So when you make that sort of aesthetic decision, it's carrying a lot of weight, and clearly a lot of craft and time went into creating that aesthetic and making it cohesive. My central problem with playing Tengami was that I don't think they leaned into that central conceit enough. So some of the central mechanics with this game is you play as a little paper samurai, kind of walking left to right and solving puzzles. And one of your main ways of interacting is turning pages on the storybook, or turning pages, kind of flipping through pages of the environment. So like maybe there's a drawbridge that's closed, and if you flip kind of little turn the page motion on the drawbridge, it flips, so the page turns and it turns into an open drawbridge. There's some sections where like there's a mountain and it's got 3 segments, and each of those segments can be flipped up and down into different variations of that segment so that you can kind of advance. Maybe you've got some stairs you need to climb up and you need to go up 3 levels, but the original configuration has no way to go up 3 levels. So you need to kind of flip through.
It sort of looks like a slot machine when you do it. Like you sort of rotate the little dials until you get a combination that works. And I think I agree. I think I wish they would have bought into the flip book aspect more. Like they did have a couple of mechanics that looked really good in flip book mode. But when I think about a pop-up book, I think about like pulling little strips and like uncovering hidden things. And when I was a kid experiencing a pop-up book myself, I found myself just wanting to explore what was on the page, like in a very tactile kind of way. And not to say that they didn't do enough, but I feel like they could have taken this further and made it more entrenching, and they kind of kept it a little bit on a superficial level. I think they could have gone deeper into the pop-up book mechanic.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Like I've played Yoshi's Woolly World, I've played Little Big Planet, I've played Kirby's Epic Yarn, and I think on that scale, Little Big Planet probably leans into that kind of arts and crafts aesthetic from a gameplay perspective, a little bit less than games like Kirby's Epic Yarn or Yoshi's Woolly World. And I think Yoshi's Woolly World kind of really executes on that idea. This is a world that everything is wool. What can we do with that as our central conceit? Oh, we could have buttons that if you pull on, it's got a thread in it, so it pulls like part of the world taut because you pulled on this button. Oh, you can go behind some of the fabric and you'll see, Yoshi behind the fabric. Oh, maybe this piece of fabric you're stepping on is springy, so it bounces you. And so there's this sense that the whole world is actually made of these materials that you're very familiar with, and it lets you have mechanics like pulling on an object to make the world kind of scrunch, and it makes pulling on something and then having the world scrunch is not a mechanic that is intrinsically interesting or understandable.
It's not like taken for granted. We take new things for granted in a game like that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying more is that is not a mechanic that is inherently understandable is not the right term that I want. No, because you can understand it. It's just like it doesn't have that warm, fuzzy feeling that you feel when you pull on a button and then it pulls everything tight. Like piggybacking is a term that I've heard used for this for Magic the Gathering design. where you pick a design that is based in some real world concept. And so you take for granted, the player's familiarity with those materials or with that concept to kind of, you touch a little bit of nostalgia or a little bit of familiarity in their own brain to add some weight and knowability to your mechanic that makes it a lot more resonant than it would be otherwise. And I found that in Tengami, a lot of the time, their big puzzles were puzzles that could have been in any game. They'd be in place like any puzzle game, like a Professor Layton game or something like that. And if they weren't in a pop-up book, it would be totally fine to port. Like there are puzzles where you have to find an item and then plug it into a slot and then rotate some
like dial or something like that.
Rotate a dial or like ring some bells. And there's nothing about ringing a bell or rotating a dial that is intrinsic to a pop-up book. That could have happened if it was just set in an ordinary Japanese setting or in a British setting or anywhere. And the puzzle would have worked. And that's not to say that the puzzles were bad. They actually were solid puzzles, I found. But when you're making a 1 or 1.5 hour game where everything is set in a puzzle book with this excellent music that really evokes a Japanese style, I want every single puzzle. If it's an hour and a half, you only have like 10 puzzles to play with. I want them all to draw on that one core aesthetic and really be cohesive. I don't want to play a puzzle game that is like a well-designed puzzle game, but is like so many other puzzle games in terms of design. And that's what kind of disappointed me, because I otherwise found it to be an enjoyable experience. I just wanted more.
There was one puzzle that I think did use the pop-up book mechanic really well, and it was one where you're trying to find a combination, and to find it you had to only like halfway turn the pages to find the combinations of the stuff while the pages were in flux. Do you remember that part?
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I thought that was clever.
That was pretty cool because you had to essentially find the combination to this lock, and you kind of got a hint of what to do when you found one of the last characters that were going to make the combination. In that, while you were turning the pages, obviously the pop-up book is like folding and unfolding, and you might see a crease of paper that is actually not in view when it's totally open, and not in view when it's totally closed, but only in the middle transition. So you kind of have to like not just flip the page fast, but flip it and hold it in the middle while it's kind of in transition, and like look around what's unfolding, and you'll see like a little hidden character, and that could only be accomplished in pop-up book mode. So that was one of the only times that I feel like the pop-up book architecture mattered so much. Like it actually enhanced the gameplay as opposed to just being, I guess, like a cute factor. Doesn't mean that I didn't like it. I just mean that we really didn't get gameplay payoffs by the puzzle book mechanic, other than it being this kind of very cute way to interact with the world. Some examples are like Drawn to Life or Okami, where their cuteness was like you can sort of like paint what's going on in the world around you. Well, those kind of things are kind of like upfront, kind of superficial. They didn't really go too deep than just the surface of a game mechanic. We had a cool opportunity here to go pretty deep, and I think, not to take too much away from the developers who had like an indie game, we could have done more with the pop-up book stuff. I think we just maybe didn't.
Yeah, and there were some, you're invoking origami as well when you're making it a Japanese setting with this kind of folded paper stuff, and I kind of thought that there'd be more playing with the folding element. Like, I thought that it was very cool that there were transitions when you're turning pages. Like, it's not just two states. You don't hit a button and it goes from one to the other. You have to actually turn the page, which this game is also available on mobile. Did you play it on mobile?
I did not play it on mobile. I played it on desktop.
Well, if you're folding and actually having to do the mousing with your finger, I think that it plays very well, that you're tactile. You have this sense of you have to really turn the page. It's not just a button, and that there is an intermediate state that's relevant to gameplay.
It's also on the Wii.
Oh,
and so you
I didn't know
can
that.
do like Wiimote turning. I played it with like a keyboard and mouse, and unfortunately I had to play on a trackpad based on
Yeah.
where I was playing. I actually had massive computer problems recently, so I'm on my laptop for the past couple days,
Okay.
and so I had to play on a trackpad, and that kind of took away some of the experience. And then I looked up, I was like, well, maybe I'll just use a gamepad, and they actually don't support controller with this game. I found it kind of odd, but the developers released a comment. I think I saw a comment from the developers on like the Steam community page saying that it was just really, really, really hard for them to get controller mechanics to work for this game, so they kept it keyboard and mouse.
It wouldn't play well with controller mechanic. I don't think a control pad. I think you could make it work. I don't think it would be the best way to play it at all.
I mean,
even mouse wasn't super great.
Even though I think mouse wasn't super great, I liked that me actually moving my hand was what made the page turn. I think it would have been cool on like a Wii, because me like waving my Wiimote would have turned the page, so I would have had like a page turning motion. That might have made it a little more interesting, but that doesn't get too much far beyond regular Wiimote sort of cuteness.
Yeah, and the one other thing that really jumped out to me is how slow the game is, just in terms of movement speed. And it's something that, maybe it's just because we play these games to, kind of talk about them, and so sometimes you want to get through them just if you're short on time. Maybe if I was just playing it on a bus or something, or in a mobile situation, it wouldn't have jumped out at me as so much. But I found that I was spending a lot more time waiting for my samurai to get to where I wanted him to go than I was thinking about how to solve a puzzle. And usually it jumps out to me when I'm spending more time waiting for the game to happen than playing it.
And I mean, I also had an experience like that, and I want to jump into this one thing as well. There was a time that, and this really isn't the fault of the game that much, but I actually got like locked out of the game for a while, and I couldn't progress, and it had to do with me going from like one like I had my laptop plugged into my TV so that I could play it on the big screen, and then I pulled out my HDMI cable, and then all of a sudden the game stopped being interactable. I could run around the world, but everywhere that there would be a pop-up book interactable, it got like disabled, and so I couldn't progress anymore. It was pretty weird, so I got locked out for like an hour. I had to just like completely turn off the game, turn it back on, and like hope that I didn't lose anything save file-wise. But I really got to feel the slowness of the game when I had to look at the same screen for like 45 minutes because I thought I was stuck. Just walking back and forth across the same scenery and saying, I can't figure out what to do. I can't make the world work unless you are actively going to do. I mean, I'm saying this kind of wrong. It doesn't seem so slow if it's your first time seeing everything, because you're taking it in the scenery and it's kind of nice. But if you ever have to backtrack, boy, is it slow, because you've already seen this now.
Yeah, and the game asks you to backtrack several times.
Like the second level where you're going through the seasons, you have to kind of go through the same area multiple times, and it looks very similar. It's just a kind of a different color palette. And that particular part of the game, I think, was the slowest for me. Not just because I had that weird bug that made me get locked out, but because that part was you just walking back and forth across the same pagoda field. I
mean, even the first section where you're walking through the lanterns
with the wolves,
and the lanterns, like there are times where you're walking and there are two paths. There's like one obvious structure, and then maybe you can keep walking past it. And if you go into that structure, that means you'll probably run into a dead end, and so you'll have to walk all the way to the end of this other place. So there were plenty of times where I was like, do I need to walk all the way to the edge of the world because there's a thing there? Because if I'm wrong and there's nothing there and I have to walk for a while, it's going to take me a while to get the way back. And it's just minor annoyances. Like, it's not a huge deal. It's just this game is very slow in terms of its movement speed, and I didn't see an option to speed it up. And even the last puzzle, like when you're on the boat, you have to go all the way to the right, all the way back to the left, all the way to the right. And it's a little annoyance in what is an hour and a half game. Like, part of me is like, is the movement speed so slow so that the game takes longer? In the way that like random encounter rates are super high in JRPGs sometimes just to pad out the runtime, or like the number of enemy spawns is higher in like a Call of Duty game so that you don't advance. But this game's only way to toggle was to slow down the movement speed. I'm not sure. But also the load times were surprisingly long on the PC.
Yeah.
I was running on an SSD and the load times were like a minute or like 30 seconds, and I was really surprised by that. I mean, it's not like a huge deal, but these are like a lot of little minor things that jump out. Like my main problem was the actual design. But one thing that I have no criticism, like I think the aesthetic is excellent. I think the color palette is great. I think the character models are really strong. And the soundtrack by David Wise is outstanding.
I want to hit on the aesthetic a little bit. I think that they did do something cool here. So we've kind of been pretty critical so far, and rightfully so. Like, we shouldn't just say nice things to say nice things. This is a beautiful game, but it definitely had a couple of points to critique. I think that they did something really, really cool with their color aesthetic involving depth and texture. So this game was a series of like 4 major places. There was like the root town, like your tree. Then there was 3 big levels, and each of those levels had a couple different sections. So there's basically like 3 big levels and then a couple sub-levels, and there's not that many levels, but each of them kind of stuck to one aesthetic or one color scheme. Many, many, many of these levels had one color scheme, but there were just different tones or shades of that particular color. And so when color is sort of taken out of the equation by being in so many ways equal, you focus on other things like depth and texture and shadows. And this game did that brilliantly. So games that are also artistic works, things like Flower or Journey or Okami or any of those other kind of like artistic work games, they are a blast of color, and they're beautiful, and they're, organic and textured, and that's cool. But this game forces you to see other stuff, like I said, depth and shadow, and different color tones, as opposed to just multiple different colors hitting you all at once. This made us look at the work a little bit differently. I really appreciated their artistic style.
Yeah, and their paper texture, like their colored paper that they used as backgrounds, I found to be just really visually striking, because I haven't seen that sort of style before. So I thought it made a really big impact. And maybe one of my biggest problems is this game came out after, well, no, it came out before Kubo and the Two Strings, but I played it after I saw the movie Kubo and the Two Strings. And I feel like Kubo is like this game and like way better. And that's my problem. I think it's just that movie is about a boy who can play a guitar, and when he plays guitar, paper folds itself into like 2D samurai stories, and they come to life, and it's all claymation and like super high def and crazy, and then also like the story is much more in depth. So it just, and of course it's set in like a fictional Japan also, so it's just there's a lot of overlap.
The environment here is pretty interactable, even though it's really subtle. So we have lots of ways where the environment is obviously interactable. The big folds, like the big environment changes where you can open a drawbridge or slide open a door, or make a cave open up by sliding a rock from one way to the other. Those are some of the big obvious ones.
I wish that happened more. I wish you could go behind the pages more.
Yeah, that was really, really neat. But other than that, you could actually kind of like click on trees and they'd shake off some leaves. Or you could click into the water and it would cause a ripple effect. Or you could click on an animal and it would growl at you. And that was really cool because they made parts of the world that in many cases had no reason to be interactable, they did it anyway, just so you could have some kind of tactile relation with the world. That's the same kind of criticism that I had actually with Jotun when we played that game. That game was really visually stunning, and it had great story, great level design, but the level was kind of inert. Like, it was kind of missing some life because you really couldn't interact with anything except smacking it with your axe, but it wouldn't do anything. I think I mentioned in that particular podcast, I was like, man, I don't care what happens, just like let something jiggle or make a funny sound if I hit it. Like, just give me some kind of real world interaction so that it kind of comes to life a little bit. And even though all they did here was make some leaves fall off a tree or make the water ripple, I could actually touch it. Like, it was like I was touching the page more, which it was a small thing that made kind of a big difference in this game. I really like that.
I agree. I spend a little bit of time just clicking around the different levels just to feel what they wrote into that, and it definitely lent a sense of activity to what was otherwise a barren environment for the most part.
I mean, you really don't have any other NPCs. There's no dialogue. There's a time where you interact with some wolves, and that's it. You really don't get any other life-to-life interaction at all.
Mm-hmm.
And the story here is so thin that this game is really just kind of a visual experience as opposed to getting some kind of deep story. It's this game, I think, is a good cool step in the right direction because it does something neat and it does it pretty well for what it's trying to do. But as far as giving us enough game, giving us enough story, giving us enough like support pieces, I feel like it had this one cool idea, did it really well, but didn't have like the toolbox behind it to fully give it like its best presentation. Do you think that's like a fair reading of this?
I mean, I think that the developers definitely made the game they wanted to make. I don't know if it's what the game I would have wanted from this conceit. Like, I think that they made a very solid puzzle game that, is excellent among mobile game offerings, and it's actually a very solid, very tight game. And I respect the hell out of a developer who says my game is an hour and a half, and that's enough. This is what we made. We have these cool environments. We have these cool mechanics. We've made this much. You don't have to play it for forever. This is enough game. This is what we want to make. So I think that that's great. When I see that conceit, I want 100% buy-in. I want an hour and a half of the most storybooky, flipbooky game possible. Not necessarily the best kind of puzzle mechanics, that are just kind of generically portable from place to place.
Now that I think about this being offered on mobile, I actually kind of have to take a step back and say, like, this game was actually kind of blows out most other mobile games that are like this. I mean, yeah. I think the last time, actually, I played a mobile game a lot when I was younger. It was actually a Rayman mobile game. This is from 2008 or something. And that game could be beaten in an hour, but it was a fantastic mobile Rayman game. It had 8 or 10 levels and full collectibles, great level design. It was all really different, but it was an hour of a game, and they were kind of simple. And this, now that I think about comparing that game to this game, what Tengami offers, it's actually a kick-ass mobile experience. I guess I've just been spoiled, and maybe I came into this thing thinking about it the wrong way. If I said, all right, I'm on Steam, and when I sit down and load up a Steam game, I'm thinking of something like Ori and the Blind Forest, or The Witness, or Talos Principle, or some huge epic tale. If I am unfairly lining up Tengami with those other kinds of games that we've played recently, yeah, I guess it does fall short on the story and some of the game offerings. But if I look at Tengami in a vacuum and give it more of an isolated read compared to other mobile ports, this game actually shines in a big way.
Yeah, and I think that while we're not discussing the few haikus that were there, I think that they are simple enough, but also evoke complex enough emotions that if you wanted to dwell on them, you could. I think it's just the nature of where my life is at right now that it's a little bit too hectic for me to necessarily be musing on,
3 lines of text.
3 lines of text in a 1.5 hour puzzle game. And, I might be being dismissive, and to that I'm sorry, but it's, I think that this game is actually really solid.
Like a transcript of it.
I think it's, if you were going to play a mobile game, I think Tengami is a really solid choice. I would say play it with headphones because David Wise's score is excellent.
The music is kick-ass.
Yep. So with that, go ahead. Do you have anything else, Billy? I think we covered pretty much.
Yeah, we covered most of it. My sort of brief interpretation of what the story is all about, it does give you, like I said, about 4 or 5 instances where you have a couple lines of text, and they reference things like dreams, things fading, things coming back to life, but then the very, very end of the game has you revive this like cherry blossom tree or something.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of the exact. It seems like it's like a cherry blossom tree.
It's a cherry blossom. Sakura.
And you revive that tree, and the game sort of cuts to credits before or after it gives you like another 3-line sequence that has something to the effect of, like a man's last days. Like slowly, they approach death or something like that, and it seems to be a very open-ended life and death kind of allegory or story, or I don't know,
mm-hmm.
whatever you want to call, very short snippet of story. And to me, the best thing that I can give to this is maybe it is a dying man's life flash before his eyes type thing.
Yeah,
maybe he's seeing a few of his last seasons, or since this game is very seasonal in some of its aesthetic, maybe this is just sort of a quick flash before the eyes of a man who's about to die.
Yeah, and I think that the game, with its evocation of memory, kind of draws that out. A man starts lying underneath a tree, and then kind of brings himself to the point where he started. It's winter, but instead there are flowers instead of a dead tree. And I think by flashing forward from kind of him under the tree in the spring and the fall to then in the wintertime, I think that's what they're going for. I just,
that kind of
it's very simple.
Life cycle vibe.
Yeah, it's just very simple. There's
mm-hmm.
The character has no name. He is nameless samurai, and it is a very open to interpretation sort of tale.
Yeah, I think that's it. Would I recommend this? Absolutely. I think that this game was only I got it in a Humble Bundle for like $5 amongst like 10 other games, and I'm sure it's just a couple of bucks on mobile. This game is definitely worth your time. It's going to be a visual experience. It's going to be just fun to mess around with. Yeah, it's slow at times if you have to backtrack ever, and it's certainly not a perfect package, but it does something really, really cool. And for the amount of time you're going to invest into it and the amount of resources you invest into it, it's not that much. You get a lot out of it. You get, per investment, you get a shit ton.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And so I believe if you want to get in touch with the show, go ahead at deeplistenspod, deeplistens.libsyn.com, or deeplistenspodcast@gmail.com. And so it is my turn to pick.
Dear God.
It is my turn to pick a game. I decided I had some games that were up in the air, but I kind of want to play a game that recently came out.
Think about this for a second.
I do have to think about this for a second.
Also, our schedules are getting hella weird the next week or so.
Our schedules are very weird for a while now. What game should I pick then? Because one of them that I want, we would need to get shipped, and the shipping time would take far too long. One of them I think is widely available.
Shipped,
but it takes longer.
It's not an American game. You're going to have me play something that I am not going to be able to read.
No, in that it's a DS game, and I don't think you can emulate it or get it any other way than ordering it online and having it shipped to you, because I don't think it is widely available.
Okay.
I don't. But that game's so dumb. You know what? I do kind. Okay, Billy. I have two games that I want to know. They are both properties that are well known and beloved, but they are RPG interpretations made by some of the foremost RPG designers of their time. And I want you to pick your fate. Choose your own adventure. On the one hand, you have the Super Mario RPG, which is the Super Mario license made by Square Enix into a Japanese role-playing game. I've never played Super Mario RPG. I hear there's a Gino in that game. One of the only gaming Ginos. On the other hand, we have his Super Mario's longtime platforming rival, Sonic the Hedgehog. And he stars in Sonic Dark Brotherhood, made by BioWare. It is a BioWare RPG for the Nintendo DS.
This is like cancerous.
I want to know. I've never played either of those. One of them, I just think is a good game, and I feel like I should have played. I should probably play Super Mario RPG at some point. On the other hand, Sonic Dark Brotherhood, why does it exist? How did it come to exist? Why would those two companies decide to? I want to know. I need to know. What does it even mean to have a Sonic game made by BioWare? Who thought this was a good idea? Why did anyone decide to work on this? Why, Billy? Why? Why?
This is Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood.
Yeah.
Jesus.
This is the story of a girl who cried a river and drowned the whole world. Billy.
Oh my... Gino, please. You're hurting me.
Choose your own adventure, Billy.
For the record, you could be picking games that you really, really like and you just enjoy.
We're playing Final Fantasy IX right now. I have to pick some games that are more interesting because we're already playing my favorite game of all time, Game of the Year 2016, Final Fantasy IX.
You mean shit show of the year? Okay. Here's my dilemma. Like, I feel like Super Mario RPG is just straight up the better of those two games. One, I think you would probably just not want to play the better of the two games. I think you want to play the weirder of the two games, so we can have more things to talk about. I think that a lot of people know and love Super Mario RPG, and that game is kind of well known. But I feel like this weird ass Sonic game, people have probably not seen as much, and that makes me kind of lean towards the Sonic game because Super Mario RPG is kind of well established and people know it's good. Like, people speedrun Super Mario RPG. That was on like a SGDQ one year.
No one speedruns Sonic Chronicles Dark Brotherhood.
I don't think anyone is really all about this game. So let's just...
Billy, is Big the Cat a playable character in Sonic Chronicles? Can you look that up?
Man.
Is Big the Cat an unlockable character? I need to know.
I'm going to look up Sonic Oh my god.
Is Big the Cat there? Is Blaze the Cat available?
Just chill. Playable characters?
Are Knuckles chaotic? Can we play as the Chaotix? Is Cream the Rabbit there?
I'm looking. Playable characters. All right. Hang on. I got it. So playable characters. We got.
No,
Sonic.
I don't need to know all of them. I just need to know, is Big the Cat one of them?
Big the Cat is one of them.
Well, great. Now we're playing that game.
Cream the Rabbit is also a playable character.
Fuck yes, Cream the Rabbit.
Cream is a character. Cream is an optional support character.
That's all I need to know. Don't read more. I need to find out the rest organically. I need to know if Shadow the Hedgehog and Silver the Hedgehog are there. Oh God, Silver the Hedgehog. No, I don't want to know.
Do you want to know?
No, I don't. I want to find out if the Japanese princess from Sonic the Hedgehog for the Xbox 360 is there. Sonic's female love interest from Sonic the Hedgehog for the
what would her name
360.
be?
I don't know. I don't want to know. But Billy, don't tell me anything more. We are going to play Sonic Brotherhood.
I'm just looking, and this just seems like this should not have been born.
It seems ill-advised, doesn't it?
I mean, nothing can be worse than Silent Hill 4 or whatever we played that one time.
Silent Hill, The Room is not a bad game.
Yeah. It wasn't Tommy Wiseau's Room. It also wasn't Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam.
Yeah. This is the year of games that should not be.
I even took like a step off of Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden. Like, that game was not as offensive as maybe I made it out to be, but it still was, a little bit hot garbage in some spots. And I feel like this game is in sort of like a dark brotherhood of its own with games like Silent Hill for the Room and Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam Gaiden that maybe should not have come into existence.
I just don't know how did Billy, when two people the people made Charles Barkley Shut Up and Jam, they had to convince themselves that it was worth making. That's all. That was the barrier. That was all they had to convince. Someone had to convince a boardroom of executives from two of the largest, at the time, at least one of them was significant, game companies in the entire world, that they should put entire teams and years of their lives into Sonic Chronicles, Dark Brotherhood, and now we're going to find out whether it was all worth it or not.
That is what we're going to find out. Holy
I can't
shit.
wait.
This is going to be weird.
I can't wait to text Pete and then see what names he calls me. He's going to have a fun text waiting for him when he finally looks at his phone. So,
all right, let's wrap this shit show up.
Thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you, Billy.
Thank you very much, Gino. I had a fun time playing Tengami, even though it was kind of short. I think this was a very short, sweet, and nice, refreshing break from some of the more hectic stuff that we do on the show. Final Fantasy IX stuff is fun, but that can get hectic, and some of the other games we play can get kind of hectic, and this was kind of a nice little respite.
Yes, before the badness.
Before the badness. Before the bad comes.
Yes. So, thank you, listeners, for joining us. Next time we'll be playing Sonic Chronicles, Dark Brotherhood. Thank goodness. Till next time. Peace.